Mysteries from the Dark. Today, we take a look inside 4 of the U.S. greatest unsolved disappearances of all time. According to Popular Mechanics, these 4 chilling and unsolved disappearances in U.S. history continue to fascinate modern-day sleuths and fuel speculations of foul play. From D.B. Cooper to Amelia Earhart, these names are etched in history, with their biographies left unfinished. First, Amelia Earhart, one of America's most famous aviators, soaring not just through the skies but through the proverbial glass ceiling. Amelia Earhart remains most remembered for her landmark aviation accomplishments. As biography notes, Earhart wasn't just the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, but the first person to fly across both the Atlantic and the Pacific. These feats earned her the nickname Lady Lindy, an admittedly reductive reference to fellow aviator Charles Lindbergh. But sadly, their flights are not the only thing the two have in common. They're also both associated with macabre mysteries that continue to fascinate the public. With Lindbergh, it was the matter of his kidnapped child. But it's the disappearance of Earhart herself, as well as her navigator Fred Noonan, that continues to baffle amateur sleuths to this day. The plane containing Earhart and Noonan disappeared on July 2, 1937. Earhart was attempting to set a new record, becoming the first person to fly around the world at the equator. It was actually Earhart's second attempt to do so, after a crash earlier that year ended her first attempt just days into her trip. A retooling of plans in the wake of the delays, including rerouting the intended journey and abandoning the plane's CW transmitter, which neither Earhart nor Noonan knew how to operate, arguably contributed to the flight's disappearance. Theories range from the plane running out of fuel and crashing into the sea, to an emergency landing on Gardner Island, now known as Nikumaroro, roughly 350 nautical miles from their intended landing point. To date, no one has been able to determine the final resting place of Earhart, who was legally declared dead on January 5, 1939. Cue Jimmy Hoffa. You've seen the old movies? When somebody goes missing, the first question the detectives ask is often, "Can you think of anyone who would wish them harm?" Well, in the case of Jimmy Hoffa, you might have a harder time listing the people who didn't. One of the most significant figures in the American labor movement, Hoffa is now more remembered for his unsolved disappearance than his accomplishments, both celebrated and infamous. Hoffa understood the immense power as the lead of the Teamsters Union, a power he supplemented with his involvement with organized crime. As biography notes, Hoffa's career was marked by highs, negotiating the first national freight hauling agreement, and lows, a 1967 prison sentence for jury tampering, fraud, and conspiracy, all of which put him in the crosshairs of everyone from the mobsters he conspired with to Robert Kennedy and the federal government. On July 30, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa left his home in order to meet at a restaurant with some organized crime figures in a bid to mend fences. He never came home, though Hoffa's remains have never been found, and no official answer has ever been given for his disappearance that hasn't stopped some from taking credit. The most notable example is Frank the Irishman Sheeran, whose confessional book, I Heard You Paint Houses, was turned into the 2019 film, The Irishman. 3. The Roanoke Colonists. Adventurer and author Sir Walter Raleigh's 1616 exploits in South America led to his conviction for treason and ultimately his death. We know that Raleigh was executed on October 29, 1618, and his remains are interred at St. Margaret's Church, Westminster. But while an arguably bleak end for the man who was once held in such esteem by Queen Elizabeth I, it's far better than the fate that befell the inhabitants of the colony he established on the coast of North Carolina. Raleigh founded the Roanoke colony in what is now North Carolina in 1585. It was an attempt to found the first permanent English colony in North America. Over 100 colonists were placed on Roanoke to develop the area. 5 years later, however, a ship visited the area and found that the colonists had disappeared. The only clue was the word Croatoan carved into a stake wall. To this day, theories abound about just what became of the Roanoke colonists. Were they brutally slayed in a massacre? Did they integrate themselves into nearby indigenous communities? But centuries later, historians are no closer to accounting for just what happened to the settlers in Sir Walter Raleigh's most infamous colony. For D.B. Cooper. What happened to D.B. Cooper after he leapt from that plane? Nobody knows. Nobody even knows who D.B. Cooper was even before he boarded that plane. The saga of D.B. Cooper has endured for more than 50 years now, partly because of the bloodless nature of the crime that makes it a little more fun to speculate on than more gruesome mysteries. What we do know is that on Thanksgiving Eve in 1971, a man identifying himself as Dan Cooper committed the most famous unsolved skyjacking in history. Able to collect a $200,000 ransom, Cooper then leapt from the plane with a parachute, never to be seen again. Years later, some of the money did turn up on the north shore of the Columbia River. And though the FBI closed the case on Cooper, choosing to allocate resources elsewhere, that hasn't prevented plenty of amateur investigators to continue searching for the man behind the infamous shades. As recently as 2023, people have come forward with what they claim is new evidence that can narrow down the search for just who it was that leapt from the plane that night. Dozens of reports, countless hours of investigation, and yet no arrests, no remains, no answers. The authorities call them cold cases. Families call them nightmares. They vanished without a trace. No witnesses, no explanations, just silence where lives used to be. And yet, their names still linger, whispered in shadows and traveling along cold winds. Forgotten by most, but maybe not by you. So before we leave you with one final thought, ask yourself this: have you heard of these disappearances? Or is someone making sure you haven't? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe before more names are added to the list.